Hello, thank you for listening to this short video. It's going to be about the two basic elements of contract that form the agreement part of a contract. You'll need to know about the four basic elements of contract, which are somebody makes an offer, another party accepts it, something of value is exchanged, and between them they intend to form a legally binding agreement. So each one aspect of those needs to be understood and you need to be able to define it. And in this short video we're going to look at the first two of those, which are said to be the agreement part of a contract. Just a little warning note at the beginning. Words in contract law, as in other aspects of law that you've discovered, are used in a different way from everyday life. So consideration, for example, usually means showing a bit of thought about something, but here it has a totally different meaning, which will be explored in the next video. So just to make a few short statements about the importance of contract law, it underpins the way we do everything. Everyday life, buying cups of coffee, buying books, buying train tickets, bus tickets, petrol, all of that is underpinned by a mechanism which we may or may not be aware of, and that we're going to explore together in these videos about contract law. So basic life, functioning and buying things, all rests on the way it's been analysed by the law. So you need never know most of the time, but if you get into a dispute of any kind, or if you're asked as an accountant to advise on aspects of this, you need to understand the framework that the law imposes on it so that you know where risk and liability lies. So what should happen when a contract is formed? A shopper sees something in the shop, goods, and there's the shop assistant in the shop. The shopper says, I'd like to buy this box, these goods, whatever it is. That is them making an offer. And the shop assistant says, okay, that'll be $5.99. Effectively, that's an acceptance. Then the shopper gives the money. That's what we call the consideration. And a contract is formed in which, because they're in a shop, the law says intention to be bound by the agreement is presumed. So it's just a natural inference of the law that if you are in a situation where things are being bought and sold, when you go in and offer to buy, then you intend to be bound by a contract. And of course, we don't even need to speak. You walk into the shop, you see the goods, you hand over the goods to the assistant, and the money is exchanged, and you still have a contract. So no words are necessary to form a contract. No writing is necessary to form a contract. We can, by our actions, say the same things effectively. So in fact, there's very little formality in the way in which the law will assume a contract is formed. It will impose on a set of circumstances like that its understanding of all parts of it. So let's go back. We need to define each element carefully. And the first element is the offer. You should know that an offer is a definite promise to be bound on specific terms. So it has to be something that's clear enough and sharp enough to be acceptable, to be able to be capable of acceptance. So if you look at these four statements, which one of those do you think is a definite promise to be bound on specific terms? If I sold this watch, I'd want £10 for it. You can buy my watch for £10. Would you like to buy my watch for £10? Watch for sale, £15 or near offer. So which one of those do you think is a definite promise to be bound? Something that an individual could accept. Hopefully you picked number 2. So number 1 isn't an offer because it's conditional. If I sold this watch. Number 2, yes, you can buy my watch for £10. Number 3, would you like to buy my watch? Sounds a bit like an offer, but there are no terms included in that statement, so it can't be an offer. And the or near offer, watch for sale or near offer, £15 or near offer, again introduces an element of uncertainty, which means it's not a definite promise to be bound on specific terms. And the normal rule about offers is they must be communicated. So if they are to be effective, they have to be communicated. It's no good writing that in a sealed envelope and putting it where someone can't see it. Offers must be communicated. And they can, as we'll see now, be communicated to the world at large. So this is an excerpt from an advert in the 19th century for a thing called a carbolic smoke ball. It's a very famous case in law. So this advert was put out claiming the carbolic smoke ball will cure all these ailments that you see on the slide. And anyone who chose to buy one and then caught flu could win £100 reward. So that was specific, detailed enough. And the key thing at the bottom there, underneath the word influenza, £1,000 is deposited. That turned out to be crucial in the legal analysis of whether Mrs. Carlyle, who bought a smoke ball and caught flu and then wanted to claim her reward, whether she was entitled to it, because the company tried to say, well, actually, this was not specific enough for us to be bound by it. But the fact that it's a £100 reward and they specifically said they'd put money in the bank, £1,000 is deposited to cover this reward, led the court to believe it should be treated as a definite offer made to the whole world, which was accepted by Mrs. Carlyle when she bought the smoke ball and used it in accordance with their instructions. So offers must be communicated, but they can be communicated if specific enough and definite enough to the whole world. Now, here's another sense in which the word offer we're familiar with is not the same as what I'm talking about. So we might say this cheese is on offer in the supermarket, or here's a offer for tickets for the summer ball, or on the website, lots of things on offer. Now, these are not offers in the legal sense. An offer in the legal sense, remember, it's a good idea to learn a sentence definition, is a definite promise to be bound on specific terms. The law would say all of these things, which are adverts effectively, are what we call invitations to treat. So that's a phrase you should learn. It's an invitation to treat. An invitation to treat means it's inviting you to come in and make an offer, to do some business. So when you go to the supermarket and you see goods priced at a certain price on the shelf, it's not actually an offer. It's an invitation to treat. You are the one who makes the offer when you pick the cheese up and you go to the till and you say, effectively, I'd like to buy this. And then the shop at that point can say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. So remember, these are not offers, even though they look like offers. They're invitations to treat. When does that offer you've made come to an end? Once you've said you'll sell something for a certain amount, is the offer open until someone accepts it? Well, yes, it has to be, but if you at any point before someone accepts it withdraw the offer, say, do you know what, I've changed my mind, that's called revocation, and that brings an offer to an end. So once you've said, actually, I don't want to sell it, then the offer has come to an end and no one can accept it. After a reasonable period of time, an offer will lapse. So what's reasonable depends on what you're selling. So if you're selling a book, that's going to be a longer period of time than if you're selling fresh milk, when obviously just a few days would be an unreasonable period of time. If the person to whom the offer is made quibbles over terms, disagrees with the price, asks for clarity on terms, anything like that, that can bring an offer to an end. So once they question the offer, it becomes a counter offer really, and then you're free to accept or reject that. If you die as someone making the offer, it's obviously difficult to finish the deal, so that would bring an offer to an end. So those are the main situations in which offer comes to an end. What is the form is that, as I said earlier on, there are no special requirements for most contracts. They are implied by what we say, what we do, what we write. Only a few have to be in writing, and obviously if you go into business, some of these will apply. Transfer of shares in a limited company, assigning of debt, buying and selling of property, everything must be in writing, and for property it has to be by deed. That's a witnessed piece of legal documentation. So the acceptance, we've had the offer. What do we know about the acceptance? Again, good idea to learn a definition of acceptance. It's an unconditional positive act by the person to whom an offer is made, and effectively it brings into play a binding contract. So the point is it's got to be a mirror image of the offer, and it has to be unconditional. Now, if it's unconditional and exactly the same as the offer, then you have agreement, you have an acceptance. Generally, of course, it must be communicated, and you think I'm mad saying generally, but we'll look at that, complications of that in a minute. But the normal rule is if you're in the same place and you nod or you shake hands or you say yes, acceptance is communicated. But the problems obviously come if you're not in the same place when the contract is being formed. So when a letter of acceptance goes out, when is it accepted? Is it the moment you post it? Is it the moment it's in the post box? Is it the moment it's received? If you're on the phone and there's a delay on the line, is the acceptance when you speak or when it's heard at the other end? And you might think these things are irrelevant, but if you're battling for big contracts and about where they're effective, under whose jurisdiction they're going to be adjudicated if there's a row, it matters whether it's made in the UK where you speak or in Taiwan where you heard. So all sorts of electronic and non-face-to-face communication makes the law on agreement slightly more complicated than it would otherwise be. Okay, so the complication we have goes back to a time when there was way less choice in the means of communication. So postal service in London was pretty good back in the 19th century when this was set up, so it made more sense then, but it's still there because the law, as we saw when you learnt about judicial precedent, doesn't update itself automatically. It has to wait for cases to come to court, and then the judges can make new rules appropriate to the new circumstances, unless, of course, Parliament chooses to intervene. But its default position is that it lets the law get on with it, unless there's a crisis of some kind. So, under the postal rule, if you send an offer, a definite promise to be bound, and it's received on the 5th, and you post your acceptance on the 5th by putting a letter in the letterbox, then the postal rule says the acceptance is effective at that point. So offer to be bound, sent on the 2nd, post arrives. As soon as you send your letter of acceptance, you put it in the post box, the law says that is a contract formed. And that would be fine, but suppose it's delayed for some reason. You were expecting it to arrive on the 7th and you haven't heard anything. So in fact, you sell the thing to somebody else on the 8th and it's gone. That product that you had offered to sell to whoever it was, and you think they've rejected it, you've sold it to someone else. And then, oh dear, their acceptance arrives the next day. So what do you do? The law says you're now in a bind because you had an effective contract the minute they had posted their acceptance there. So you should have waited because now you're in trouble. You've sold it to someone else on the 8th and you have a binding contract with them, and you actually have a binding contract with the person to whom you originally offered it. Now it might look bonkers, but that's the way the law chose to apportion the risk. So it's easily avoided just by saying, I won't accept your acceptance until I actually have it in my hands, and that way you'd have avoided the trouble. But email, of course, is even quicker and more complicated. Suppose you send your offer at 9 o'clock in the morning and it's received seconds later into somebody's inbox, and the email acceptance, they spend a day to think about, is sent in the evening. When is that acceptance effective? It hits your inbox in the evening when you're not at work. Is it effective then? Is it effective when they push send? Or is it effective the next morning when you read it? And it makes a difference in contracts which are complicated, say about where they're made. And if you're answering a question on this, there is no definite answer because the law hasn't completely caught up on it. But what you have to explain is there are a number of possibilities. A contract depends on offer and acceptance meeting. And that meeting, when it's about communication, is easy when you're face-to-face in a shop because it happens instantaneously. But if you're on the phone, if you're using email or WhatsApp or any other instant form of communication, there's a gap between offering and accepting. And the law at some point just has to choose where it's been effective. Suppose you changed your mind in an email before anything had been read. Can you do that? So it makes a difference, and actually there have been cases that go to court arguing about when acceptances are effective. As I say, you don't need to know in a way how to resolve it. What you need to know is that there's an issue to think about.